is Steve Gennaro, and you're listening to Beyond the Game.
In this interview, I had the chance to talk to Steve Gennaro, who is the director of All In Sports Talk Radio and host of TFC Talk. During the interview, Steve was talking to me about TFC's season in 2016, which of TFC's young players he believes has the best chance to have a breakout season in 2017, and Toronto FC's newest signing, Chris Mavinga. So let's tune into that conversation right now. Hello everybody, today we are happy to be joined by our guest. He is director of All In Sports Talk Radio and host of TFC Talk, Steve Gennaro. Hello Steve, welcome to Beyond the Game.
Oh, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Steve, as mentioned, you host TFC Talk on All In Sports Talk Radio. Can you talk to us a little bit about what motivated you to create a soccer talk show and why Toronto FC?
Okay, well, two things here. First, All In Sports Talk is a soccer-only radio station, actually. So 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, online, soccer talk covering every team, every league around the globe, around the planet. You get the free app from the Google Play Store or the App Store, and download and listen anytime you want. So that's why the interest from soccer comes from there. Why Toronto FC? I cover the team now. I've covered them for a couple of years, MLS press accredited, and I live in the city of Toronto. And one of the things that I've noticed is just the lack of coverage for Toronto FC as a fan or as a supporter. You can't get access to them the same way that some of the other major clubs or major teams from other sports get coverage in the city of Toronto. So it seemed logical then, if I love soccer, which I do, I'm passionate about the sport, I love this club, which I do, Toronto FC, and to have access to the media, which I do as a media accredited member, to put them all together and try and provide more for other fans like me out there.
TFC had a great season in 2016. They reached the MLS Cup Finals for the first time in franchise history, where they unfortunately lost to Seattle on penalty kicks. While covering the team in 2016, what were some of the differences you noticed in both the team and its fan base compared to previous seasons?
I think the biggest difference between 2016 and 2015, if you talk about maybe tactics, was the head coach Greg Vanney, I think, came of age in 2016. In 2015, there were a lot of tactical changes and shifts that he was making that didn't seem to fit the same way, whereas in 2016, it almost felt like every substitution he made, he got right. Every time he made a tactical change, whether he was playing a 4-4-2 with a diamond midfield, or whether he was playing three center backs in like a 3-5-2 setup, everything he did seemed to work. Now, part of that, I think, is because they made some great off-season additions. They added veteran players at core positions, Stephen Beitashour, Drew Moore at the back, Clint Irwin in the net as the keeper. Those, I think, really helped solidify them. But also, too, they got great play from their younger players, from their, we'll say, rookies, so to speak, but academy players who came of their own. So when Javinko was injured, when Michael Bradley and Josie Altidore were away on international duty with the Team USA, they got great play from Mo Babuli, Jordan Hamilton, Jay Chapman, Marky Delgado. All these young players came through and really made a difference. So I think the club really came of age. The coach came of age, the players came of age, and we saw the city, I think, come of age as well. Supporters have always been excellent, top-notch, some of the best in the world, and you hear that from everyone who comes through here. But it wasn't just the ultras that were fantastic as normal. The casual soccer fan in Toronto came of age as well in 2016, and we saw that with consistent 30,000 a night at BMO Field, lots of sellouts, and lots of people just dying to get their hands on tickets. Really great to see all across the board.
For those just joining us on Vibe 105, we're speaking with the host of TFC Talk, Steve Gennaro. Steve, you mentioned Jordan Hamilton and Jay Chapman as young Toronto FC players who stepped up this past season. There were others like Tsubasa Endo and Alex Bono who stepped up and played great games when called upon. In your opinion, which of Toronto FC's young players can you see having a breakout season in 2017? And what do you think they need to do in order to maintain a place in Coach Vanney's starting 11?
Well, you mentioned Bono. I didn't even mention him, but probably should have mentioned him first because he was spectacular in the net when Clint Irwin went down, was injured in Orlando. We saw Bono come in and really, during the best streak of soccer that Toronto FC played all season, Bono was the keeper during that. Now, he's probably unlikely to hold that starting position this season because TFC, they just signed Clint Irwin to a new deal, so it's going to be really difficult for him to break through and get a consistent run as the number one keeper. But head coach Greg Vanney has said that that's an open competition. I think it's much more likely that someone who's going to play in the midfield and probably in that sort of number 10 position, right, at the highest point, the tip of the diamond behind Giovinco behind Altidore, and that might be Chapman, might be the one who can really push in there and get an opportunity. I think he'll get some run at that spot because there had been some talk of Toronto FC signing an international player to play in that particular position, but there's really nothing on the radar at this moment. So I think Jay Chapman will get a chance to play there. Him and Osorio will sort of battle it out for who will get that opportunity. And if you look at Chapman's season last year, especially when he sort of came into his own throughout the early parts of the summer, he seems ready to push on. So I would say that if I had to pick sort of one young player to break through this season, he's probably who I would go with.
Throughout the season, Vanny would use the 4-4-2 diamond formation. However, when the team signed Toyson Ricketts, Vanny would rarely adjust to a 4-3-3 with Giovinco, Altidore, and Ricketts leading the attack. With TFC's team as it currently stands, which formation do you feel would make the team more successful going forward?
It's interesting you said that, right? Because very rarely did you ever actually see them play in a 4-3-3. It makes sense when you think about the offensive firepower that's there, playing the three of them together. And I've asked head coach Greg Benny about this a couple times myself. Even the possibility, this season of playing, instead of playing like a 3-5-2 at the back, playing something that allows them to play again all of their offensive firepower to the top, getting Ricketts on and getting him a full 90 minutes. But for the most part, when you see Ricketts, he comes on later in the match, either to sub out Giovinco or to sub out Altidore. And when he does come on and he plays with both of them together, it's usually when TFC are down a goal and need to create something. More than likely, I think they'll play 3-5-2. That's where most of their success in the playoffs came from. That's the only setup they played throughout the entire playoffs. 3 center backs at the back. And if you look at the recent signing of Chris Mavinga, the French or Cameroonian international that they recently just added to the roster, you're likely to see them continue to play, Drew Moore, Eric Zavaleta, and then one of Mavinga or Hagland in the back three and play that 3-5-2 setup. Having said that, I do think the team is actually better suited to play 4-4-2 at the diamond midfield. But, Greg Benny has shown that he's willing to change it, back and forth between games or even, during games itself. Before we got to the playoffs, he hadn't played the same lineup in back-to-back games all season long. So, you kind of have to wait and see how the rest of the preseason plays itself out. But you'll probably see, again, either 3-5-2 or the 4-4-2 diamond.
Once again, for those just joining us on Vibe 105, we're speaking with the host of TFC Talk, Steve Gennaro. Steve, as you mentioned, during the offseason, Toronto FC signed French defender Chris Mavinga. Do you think he's a player that can make an immediate impact, or do you think he'll be a signing that impacts the team as the season progresses? Well,
all reports, from the players themselves, even, when you ask them about Mavinga, they say he's looked really good and he's big and he's strong. And, what we know about him is he came through, the PSG Academy. He came through the Liverpool Academy. He was in the French, national program as a youngster. He's actually right now a Cameroonian international and really not, didn't even play in the African Cup of Nations. So he's fallen out of favor over the last couple of years in Russia, playing with multiple teams. And some of that has been said to be a maturity issue or just hasn't been able to get things together. Certainly the talent level is there, but, it remains to be seen what his role will be. Will he play as a left back, like a left sort of wing back, which is kind of the position most people think he'll play because that's where he's come from on this club? I'm going to say probably not, because Justin Morrow plays there. And, Morrow last season was one of the best in all of MLS at that position. So, if something was to happen to Beitashour, Morrow can flip over, play the right side, and then you could play Mavinga on the left side, potentially. But for me, I think it's more likely if he does play, he'll play on the left side of a back three because he is left-footed. He's the only left-footed defender that TFC have on their roster or squad list. So it's more likely he'll play on the left side of the back three, the position you saw Nick Hagland play an awful lot of last year during the playoffs.
Before we wrap up, I'm going to shift gears a little bit and ask you about Major League Soccer as a whole. Currently, MLS have the designated player rule, which allow teams to sign up to 3 players to a salary of their choosing. Now, as you know, this is much different from other leagues where there aren't really any salary restrictions for teams to go out and sign players. Do you feel that the DP rule hinders the MLS's ability of attracting European players in their prime? And are there any adjustments you would like to see being made to the rule?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure if it detracts from MLS signing, international players in their prime. I feel like that's sort of the next stage of growth for MLS. In the beginning, the idea of getting international players in their prime to come to North America was probably unrealistic. And so what we saw early on is a lot of players post-career, in the twilight of their career, making their way over to North America. We've seen some changes, though, recently. Two things I think have been big changes. One, we've seen players like Sebastian Giovinco come over and have success here, so that demonstrates that there's an opportunity for younger European players, let's say, to come over. There's always a route for South American players to come. But I also think that the Chinese Super League is also changing the way in which people view, going and playing somewhere else. So for the right amount of money, I guess you could end up, big players in their primes could also move. But I think it's counterproductive for what MLS is actually trying to achieve. Right? There's a twofold goal of MLS. One is to provide world-class soccer or football within North America. So, so that there's a competitive league here. But that's deeply tied, I think, to the second and larger goal of MLS, over and above making money, and that's to grow the sport here. So for the national team, and in particular for the U.S. men's national team. And so then go out and just buy a slew of international players, I think would go against the sort of desired growth of the MLS. And part of the reason why you have these rules in place, it's a little bit of protectionism, and that's to ensure that there's enough domestic players playing on each individual roster. We saw the Bundesliga do something similar to this about a decade ago, and of course there's no surprise now that a decade later you see the Bundesliga, as a factory for producing some of the best players in the world, and a very high level and engaging, exciting soccer football to watch. So I wouldn't expect MLS to change what they're doing going forward. One of the things I have said, though, is it would be nice to see a fourth designated player slot, specifically for designated players who are, from your particular city, or so if you're Toronto FC and there's an international player for Canada who's born in Toronto or in the GTA in your region, that you could then add him to your club as a designated player without any additional finagling to go on in order to get him to work in there, without him counting as a homegrown, without having to worry about using up the DP slot to make the money available. So something like that I think might work long term to help them build. But as far as attracting players in their prime, as the league grows, North America is a great place to live. And as the quality of football improves, the players will come. It's just I think we're probably still one stage away from that for MLS soccer.
Yeah, I agree. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time, Steve. We would like to thank you for taking the time to chat with us here on Beyond the Game, and we wish you all the best this year.
Hey, thanks so much. Anytime.
That was director of All In Sports Talk Radio and host of TFC Talk, Steve Gennaro. Now, we're going to send it back to the studio for more Beyond the Game right here on Vibe 105.